Welcome back, everyone. One of the myths that we always hear is that stress is always bad for you. That if you're experiencing stress, it must be damaging you in some way. Well, this concept is not true and is definitely not helpful. Because if you believe it, you are basically encouraging to stop working, buy a cottage on a beach, and spend your days suntanning and not thinking at all. This is terrible and cannot be any worse for your brain health. In fact, the strongest determinant of cognitive decline has been found to be disconnection, either physically, when people disconnect from society, or hearing loss and visual loss. In fact, it has been found that elderly that have uncorrected hearing loss can increase their chances of developing dementia by as much as 9%. But the biggest determinant of cognitive decline has been seen in those who are very active and then retire and stop being active at the same level. This change in the level of cognitive activity has been found to have the greatest influence on cognition and has demonstrated the greatest decline. There's also evidence, as you will see in our Optimize section in week 10, that the kind of stress or the tension that is driven by one's purpose and the one that we have control over actually is the biggest determinant of cognitive reserve and brain longevity. Cognitive reserve is the amount of neuronal activity that can withstand a great deal of trauma and stress on the brain. These are lifelong stressors such as going through college and graduate school, running companies, doing challenging creative work. We will talk about these more in the Optimize section. But nonetheless, this type of stress is the most important one in your life because not only does it create protection through neuronal connections, but also speaks to our quality of life. Another myth is that stress is simply a part of our modern life and we just have to deal with it. This is also not true, and it usually is not the amount and type of stress, but our ability to manage it that gets us in trouble. Some of the most stressed people we know are those who have very little in their life. Yet some of the happiest and the calmest, collected people we know are those who are running multi-million-dollar companies. It is not about whether there is inescapable stress, but rather how we perceive and manage these stresses around us. When you get to the how section, we will go over how to label the stress and then manage it to your benefit. Once labeled, we're able to increase the good stresses in our life and manage the rest and give them the minimal emotional real estate they deserve. The third deadly and yet very common myth is that if you don't feel the symptoms of stress, you don't have stress. This couldn't be further from the truth, as majority of us live lives that are so busy and we don't have time to stop and label things as stress and merely consider them as part of our lives, and the chronic cumulative nature of this stress can be deadly. On a day-to-day basis, we don't experience what would be called a consequence of stress. But in reality, much of our modern day condition is in fact the product of that background stress that has never been addressed. Most of the eating disorders or even poor eating habits are as a result of stress management or lack thereof. Most of our sleep disorders are secondary to stress. Most of our headaches, neck pains, other aches and pains, and even digestive and immune problems are indirectly related to cumulative stress. We just never make that connection and treat the maladies with medication or other means without even addressing the stress, and ultimately succumb to the consequences. In fact, we believe that much of the medical problems we start experiencing in our 30s, 40s, and beyond are directly or indirectly related to stress. Another myth is that the classical meditation is the only way to reduce stress. We love meditative techniques to create islands of consciousness and awareness about one's tension, focus, and our ability to become more aware of gaining control over our emotional centers. But despite popular belief, the only way is not to cross your legs and follow a traditional meditative method. There's so many other ways to achieve this calm and focus. As a family, we love the idea of mindful breathing, walking meditation, and others. But there are many other different types of methods. We will show you more when we get to the how section of Unwind. Thank you for joining me here, and see you in the next video.